up to you, but I would recommend just skipping over the election. We could come back to it at the end.
Okay.
Wait till if she makes it or not.
Okay, okay. Well, welcome everyone to the February 4th Transportation Commission meeting. We can start with the agenda, and typically we look at the meeting minutes from past meetings, and we are approving or asking for approval for the November 28th, 2018 study session and the regular meeting on December 3rd.
You take them together?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I move approval of both sets of minutes.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Who did the second? Charlie? Okay.
One of us.
Charlie. Donna and Charlie.
Whoever's fastest.
Okay, item number 2 is general public comment. Public is allowed to speak to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the regular agenda. Each person or organization will be limited to 3 minutes. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss, debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented at this time. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments to the commission. Do we have any public comment? We have no public comment. So we'll move on. We're going to bypass item number 3 in terms of electing the chair and vice chair and move to item 4, the 2019 street maintenance program. The action is to receive the presentation of the program, and we're ready. Steve?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Stephen Lashley. I'm a project engineer with Municipal Services and Operations. One of my primary activities and responsibilities is to administrate the contracted street maintenance program. And what I've brought tonight is the comprehensive maintenance program map, but in particular focusing on the contracted maintenance locations with respect to the existing bikeway plan, and what type of impacts we have there. And we have a list of recommendations, but let me get to the map so we can look at it. So a little bit of background. In August 2018, the City Commission approved approximately $3.69 million to be utilized for contracted maintenance work. Of that type of work, it includes milling, patching, asphalt overlay, curb and gutter rehab work, as well as asphalt patching prep work in anticipation of a future microsurfacing. Annually, staff reviews the potential impact of the planned contracted street maintenance work with existing and planned bikeway facilities. Other capital improvement projects maps are on this, or CIP locations are on this map, but other design is taken into consideration, other bike ped facilities, things of that nature. In respect to the contracted maintenance, staff has reviewed the existing bike plan and has recommended installing shared lane markings, sharrows, on various streets that are planned for certain work, such as mill and overlay, and the mill and overlay curb and gutter streets in particular. Some of those street locations include, well, East 19th from Mass to east of Haskell. So where there is actually an existing bike lane We're planning on removing the asphalt, putting the asphalt back down, and reestablishing bike lanes. Lawrence Avenue, from Clinton Parkway to 31st Street. We're looking at installing sharrows at that location. Harvard, Wakarusa to Stone Creek, installing sharrows. Congressional Drive, and these locations are out west here. From 6th to Harvard, installing sharrows. We got West 7th from Kentucky to Indiana Street, installing sharrows there as well, and that's kind of a continuation of where west of Indiana, a stretch that we've included sharrows in the past. Schwartz Road, Lawrence Avenue to West 6th, and Ridge Court from 24th to 27th. Those are two locations that we have contracted milling to occur, but our internal street maintenance crews are actually doing the overlay, but we'll include in our contracted work the establishment of pavement markings of sharrows on those locations, on those existing bike routes. Other than that, that's what we have recommended in relation to our contracted street maintenance work for the year. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those. Anybody?
Any questions? Anyone? Did you put this in the context of the budget for us? Could you? In the context, what is the budget for this work this year? And
for $3.69 million for contracted street maintenance work.
okay,
Now, in terms of the cost of the sharrows, those aren't necessarily, I mean, those would be in addition to the work, I mean, but it's inclusive with the work I would be doing,
Right.
so.
right.
Pretty much reestablishment of pavement markings that would be occurring anyway, and this would be an added item.
Well, if there aren't any questions, I do want to make a comment. A couple of years ago, I think Charlie and I took a little ride around town with Steve, and it started with kind of a brief overview of the manual that he helped create to evaluate the condition of streets in Lawrence. And what I can say is I was really very impressed with the manual, the thoroughness of the manual, and it was pretty clear going around town how is it the PCI?
Mm-hmm.
How the PCI relates to the projects that are selected. And it was really, one of those things that I think are good for people to know how thoughtful this stuff is, because everybody runs into a pothole. Everybody drives a lot in their own neighborhoods. And, you can kind of develop, I think, some bias on where you go and where you live. And I just wanted to make that comment. I think that this aspect of what you guys do is very thoughtful.
Well, we appreciate that.
And I'm sure some of it's subjective, but to see, an analytical tool like that really was very thoughtful and impressive.
And it is, like I say, it's a tool to help us make decisions, and there's multiple factors that come into play, but we try to maintain an appropriate balance in putting together a program.
Yeah. If anybody's interested in doing that, I'm sure Steve would be happy to, we have some new folks around and people that have been on the board for a while too, but I think it's a good thing to know about as you move around the community and talk to people about how some of this stuff works. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Back to you.
All
We
right.
skipped 3.
Okay.
So you can start with
I
3.
assure you I'm right on time for Planning Commission. I just got a message, I think, from maybe Carol or someone,
Feels
yes,
good.
and I was like, but it's only 6. And then I realized I'm thinking about the wrong commission. Sorry about that. Okay, so we skipped to 3, you said, or no, you skipped to street maintenance.
Yes, we can go back to 3.
We can go back to 3. All right. So I wanted to welcome Carol. I know we have 2 new members. I only see 1 though.
Yeah, Nick Huesmeyer couldn't make it tonight.
Okay, okay, so welcome, Carol. Also, did we do 2? Have we covered item 2?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
okay. So, I think the first thing we would do is take nominations for a new chair, yes? Do I hear any nominations?
Well, I nominate Steve Evans.
I'll second that. Want to vote on that? Or should we nominate a vice chair also? We do that,
One
go
at
ahead
a
and do that.
time.
All
So
right.
if there's no
So-
other nominations for chair, then you can take a motion in action.
All right. All in favor of Steve Evans for chair? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? No?
Do I
All right.
abstain?
I think that's okay.
No, you can vote.
Okay.
All right. So I could let you take over.
Should we do it that way?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I've kind of looked forward to this, and I was going to try to weasel out of it because I was the vice chair, but I'm sure that no one would accept that, so thank you. I'll do my best. Now taking nominations for vice chair, and Dave, do we want to allow anybody to show interest, or do we just want to take nominations?
Both, either. I mean, you can,
Okay.
you can see if anyone's interested, they can nominate themselves, or
Okay,
you can nominate others.
okay. Well, I'd like to start with, if anyone's interested, tell us that you are and why, and we can kind of move around that way and then get to a nomination at that point, so. Anyone want to speak up? And to be clear, is it essential that the vice chair become the chair next year? That's optional, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's optional. It's not mandatory, but
Okay.
I think it's, traditionally, that's the way that it occurs, is the vice
All
chair
right.
moves into the chair, but
All right,
it's not a requirement.
okay. Well, the floor is open. Now, come on.
Can we just get clarification on, is there anybody that's not going to be on the board in the subsequent year? Like, I'm just kind of curious if anyone's kind of aging out or terming out, if there were an interest in someone, moving on from vice chair to chair.
Well, we have, looks like we have a couple, we have John and Ron have terms through the end of this year.
But they're
And
up for
then- pardon me?
reappointment. They're up for reappointment, though?
Yes, yes. And everybody else is either 2020 or 2021.
Okay.
So with the exception of Ron and John, everybody should be around. But like Chuck and Dave said, I mean, if you're,
And most likely I'll be back. I'm appointed by the school district, and to my
Okay.
knowledge, I'm not,
okay, okay.
somebody else is stepping up for it.
Well, I guess we better take nominations for vice chair. And we'd rather not draft anybody that way, but,
Well, I'd nominate Catherine Schartz, if she would consider it.
do I
Do I second?
do I have a second for Catherine?
Second.
Anyone else? Well, honestly, I always thought Donna would be a good pick, but, you know, I don't know that that's something you're really up to do.
And if nobody else wanted it, I would do it.
Okay.
But
You know, honestly, because I work in Kansas City and I have a pretty full plate, I was getting ready to nominate you when.
the handwriting.
So I would like to defer that.
I just, okay, thank you. Do we have a second for Donna?
A second.
She is.
Okay, Donna was nominated by Catherine and seconded by Charlie. I think that we'll go ahead and vote on Donna first, given the dialogue that just occurred. All those in favor of Donna becoming the vice chair for this year, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Donna is the new vice chair. Congratulations.
Thanks. Would you like to switch seats?
Nah, that's okay. I just better get it the next time.
All right.
Okay, let's move on the agenda to item number 5, the 2018 pedestrian bicycle projects. The action, to be clear, looking ahead on this, is to review the construction costs from bids received for the sidewalk gap and ADA ramp and 2017 CDBG ramp and the Haskell Crossing. Staff is recommending approval of $200,000 taken from the 2019 bike ped funds to complete construction of the 2019 sidewalk gap and ADA ramp projects. Is this Jonathan?
So basically, this is a set of 2 projects. I'll give you a quick, and I can do a map quick here. Point out where these things are at. And let this work. All right, so there's basically 2 projects. One project is a community development block grant project, and that has a number of ramps over here on 11th Street between Massachusetts and Delaware, as well as an RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon, over here at 16th and Haskell. So let's see, maybe I can turn on the satellite view. And so the CDBG is if you're familiar with the program, is specific to certain areas in town that have economic needs. And so that budget is for those particular projects. The other projects, we have 4 groups and another set of plans. And that includes Michigan Street up here, basically from 2nd to 3rd. And it includes Harvard, if I can find Harvard, over here. Let's see, is that Harvard? Yeah. Basically from Iowa over here to Hilltop on the south side of the street. And then there's a section over here down south off of 27th Street. That's a gap on the south side of the road over here at Crestline and down around the curve. And then also with that project, I'm sorry I'm zooming in and out quite a bit, but if you have questions, stop me. The other is over here on New York Street, basically between 8th Street and 13th Street, doing a bunch of ADA curb ramps up and down at several intersections. And so we had with the project is laid out in our memo. Basically, $100,000 were from sales tax for ADA ramps, and then there's $150,000 of bond money that was for the 3 gaps that I mentioned on Michigan and Harvard and 27th Street. And so we're limited on the bonds to spend that money on those 3 gaps. And then there was originally $138,000 for the CDBG improvements. And so we broke these 2 projects out, we tied them together so we could get one contractor and hopefully better bid prices. We got 4 bids on the project, all much higher than our engineer's estimate. And part of the reason is because there's a number of discrete projects instead of part of one, like a big street reconstruction. You're going to see some of those dollars offset. But because they're basically retrofits in all these little parts of town, what the contractors told us, their bids were just going to be a lot higher. So with 4 bids, we felt like we got a lot of competition, but like I mentioned, they were quite a bit higher. And so we have a couple options that we've laid out. Basically, the 3 gaps and the ADA ramps, that project, if we were to award all those groups and all the CDBG groups, we basically need to allocate about $200,000 from the 2019 ADA budget, or not ADA, but bike ped funds. So that's a $600,000 line item for the 2019 CIP. And if you recall, it goes up to $800,000, I believe, in 2020, and then $1 million after that. So in 2019, that budget's not allocated yet. So you'd be deciding basically to recommend to City Commission to make up the difference between what we have in the budget, and in order to let all these projects, to go ahead and use that $200,000 from the 2019 monies to make up the budget. The other option would be, we've shown in our memo basically only what fits in our budget now. So because the ADA ramps on New York, that group is over the budget allocated for that. We wouldn't be able to award that. We would be able to award the CDBG, even though it's over budget. We talked to community development, and they're able to supply the extra funds needed, just under $40,000 to make sure we can award the CDBG funds. The other thing I'll mention about the CDBG project is those are use it or lose it dollars. So, our recommendation is go ahead and use them so we don't lose them. But so the stripped down version would be just one gap, either on Michigan, 27th, or Harvard, and the CDBG ramps and the RRFB crossing at 16th and Haskell. Or we could take the extra $200,000 from 2019 and go ahead and award all the groups. And so the advantage of that is we've already done the engineering. It's already been identified as a priority, so just trying to go through and knock these things out so we didn't spend money on design and then we don't build stuff and we go design other stuff and forget about it, or have to come back later. So that's kind of hopefully clear. I know I've been all over the place, but if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer.
I just curious what happened in the, obviously something in the industry occurred because these bids and the estimates are in some places almost twice what the estimate was.
Oh, yeah. Well, the couple things, like I mentioned, we did actually talk to a couple of the contractors and had our consultant reach out, to get their thoughts of what occurred. Mm-hmm. The engineers basing their bids off of probably a bigger pool of projects. So like Castle had a whole street associated with it. So those curb ramps, we probably got a better deal. Or Steve's street maintenance, he's letting $3 million worth of work. Then we get a lot of bang for our buck. But when you're doing $100,000, say, at curb ramps, the scope isn't there to support it. And, we're not rebuilding the whole street around it, so they're much more challenging. You've got to field retrofit these things in, and so there's a lot of challenges. And we're being a lot more I'd say, hard-nosed in our inspection of these ramps. We've had several contractors tear out things that they've done wrong. So hopefully, over the years, as they learn, you know, they'll be able to bid more competitively too. But we have been a lot more stringent on our ADA requirements, making sure they're following, you know, ADA is a civil rights law, so we do look at that very seriously.
How many bids did you get, John?
There are 4 contractors that put in bids. And so I believe, you know, the low bid was, what did I have, about 175,000 over our bid, or 100, it was either 184 or 175, and then the high bidder was, you know, that 185 over the low bidder. So there's quite a big swing even amongst the 4 bidders.
And you accepted the low bid?
That's what we're here tonight.
I see.
So we're going to have to go to commission on the 19th and make a recommendation. Do we only award what's in our budget? Do we scrap the whole project and rebid it all? Do we grab our $200,000 from 2019 and use those dollars to just get the project done? So those are kind of the options. We wouldn't recommend scrapping, at least the CDBG, because those monies, we have to spend them by this summer or we lose them. So we really need to get a contractor on board and working. And the others, you know, I'm not sure you're going to get, you know, with the range we saw, I don't know that there's a lot of benefit in scrapping it and trying to re-let it. You're still going to have these small discrete projects around town.
Well, perhaps this is better for the discussion period, but if we did go with a reduced scope, so we wouldn't do 2 or 3 of these projects, would those projects get tossed into the bucket and reevaluated in the context of everything that's in the bucket, or do they just get pushed ahead into 2019?
Well, they would probably go, I would say they'd go back in the bucket, because
Okay.
when we prioritize the 2019 projects, then, I mean, there's that whole pool of funds. We have $600,000 in 2019 for bike ped. And so these were the priorities from our prioritization plan, these projects from last year. I think it was last April that we brought to you guys and
Got it.
proceeded with it. So if your priorities have changed, then it would go back into the bucket. We wouldn't recommend to do that since we've already gone through all the engineering
Right.
for all the projects and we only have enough funds to complete one of the 4 gaps.
Right.
So the staff recommendation is going to be to allocate some of the $19 to finish the 18 projects. We would still have $400,000 to discuss prioritizing later this spring, and the staff will bring a recommendation on how to use those funds to the Transportation Commission.
So is this budget increasing incrementally on an annual basis?
It is.
Yeah.
$600,000 in 19. I think John mentioned 800, which sounds right, in 2020, and then it gets
Okay.
up to $1 million, I
Right.
think, for the remainder of the
Right.
sales tax.
Okay. Okay. Well, unless we have any questions, Carol?
I do, I need some education.
What's the condition of the sidewalks between the ramps on New York?
I'm sure they're across the board. There's a separate city program to address sidewalk conditions in neighborhoods, so those would presumably get done at that time. And typically, that's on the property owner to address, where the city's focused more on the curb ramps and the corners that are in the right-of-way.
And my other question is on budget. Now that we have the PED bike fund, are all the ADA ramps coming out of that budget?
That's where these ramps are coming out of primarily, yes. Yeah, yeah.
Jessica Martin, I'm the Transportation Planning Manager with the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We are working with the ADA Coordinator, Brandon McGuire, who is appointed to replace Tammy Bennett since she has departed the city. And we are working on a ADA transition plan update. And as part of that update, there are inventories being done now as part of the needs assessment. And part of the conversation we're having, and we will have as part of that process, is with the CIP when we are talking about putting together our budget. If there needs to be a separate line item allocation, separate of the bike ped funding, to address both ADA transition in the right-of-way and with our buildings, facilities, and services. So I can see that being a conversation as we move forward with the operations. For the first year of the bike ped funding, though, it was a consideration to include those ADA ramps as amenities to receive allocation of that non-motorized fund. The CDBG money also is only eligible to rebuild ramps. It's not eligible to do sidewalk maintenance. So that's a contingency that's kind of chosen for us what funding is eligible for which parts of the total picture of the bike ped networks.
I'm looking forward to that, because when you just have ramps on the end, the rest of the block is useless. It's not good for anybody who needs it.
Yeah, and I think you'll see the evolution of the programming, all the programmatic approaches that are becoming more systematic, not only ADA transition, but sidewalk maintenance, but bike ped standalone funding, neighborhood traffic management, that these all kind of together each tackle a piece of what we envision to make our community more bikeable and walkable.
Anyone else? Thanks, John.
Thanks. I think we're just looking tonight for a recommendation, your guys'
Right.
recommendation to,
We'll have some public
To
comment
commission.
and then
Do
get
that.
back to you. Is there any public comment on this item?
Gary Weber, 907 Merle Court. A couple of concerns. I'm a little shocked at the prices that came in on the bids, as I'm sure you are too. Because not only it affects this project, but this bodes pretty poorly for a number of projects that we're going to be basing in the future. SRTS, those are all remodel projects. You know, they're all small scale, fill in a gap on a sidewalk. And then all the sidewalks we need to finish on arterials and collectors. And if this is the kind of pricing we're going to have on all of those sidewalks, we're in trouble. So I think you need to think hard about these kind of bids. I'm going to suggest a kind of an out-of-the-box thing for you to think about. If contractors are not interested in working with the city and want to charge at places 80% higher than engineering has estimated, maybe it's time to find a different way to put these sidewalks in. For example, if we put together Peasley and a jobs program and a training program and got people who need jobs in a training program to pour and form concrete and use them to do our sidewalks, I'm certain we could get a much more reasonable price. Now, I understand that that's taking money away from contractors, but if they're going to come in here and high bid these things and they increase, you know, I have a question for Jonathan, is it? Do you know the cost per running foot of the 5-foot sidewalk on Harvard between Iowa and, do you know what the running cost per running foot of a 5-foot sidewalk?
I gotta look up what our square yard bid is and back it out.
Could you get a figure for me? 'Cause and I'll move on to my second one. I won't use my 3 minutes up. The other thing I'm concerned about is setting this precedent of using 2019 standalone money for 2018 and 2017 projects. Now, we began at the very beginning to allocate some of those funds for ramps. That was clear from the very beginning that some of these funds were going to be used for ramps. Not all of them, but some of them. But now we're talking about taking 2017 and 2018, $200,000 out of that six. And then probably the 2019 ramps too, and there's another $200,000 or more. that doesn't leave very much for the standalone project that these are really supposed to be for. So I really wonder about taking all 3 years out of 1 year's allocation and not leaving anything for standalone bike and pedestrian projects. So the cost is one thing. I'm shocked at the high bid, and they don't want this work very badly, and if they don't want the work, why give it to them? Let's find another way that trains people, that gets sidewalks done at a lower cost, with the same quality, that gets people into work. You know, maybe it's time to think a little bit innovatively about how to build these sidewalks, because we want to build a lot of sidewalks in the next 10 years. And if we have to pay this kind of price, we can't afford it.
It's about $56
A running foot of 5-foot sidewalk.
on Harbor, yeah.
Well, that's an incredible amount of money to pay for sidewalk. But I'm going to let you worry with that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, back up here for further discussion, questions.
I have some.
Go ahead,
comments
Carol.
Just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I hesitate to spend ahead. I think it's a bad practice. And usually I think of myself as a liberal, but I guess with finances, I'm a conservative. I don't want to spend for next year, and we're not even into this year. I think that's a bad idea. For all the years that I've been participating in and listening to costs on sidewalks, this has been a long haul. It's come up over and over again that we should take a street and do a street because we might be able to cut a better deal. And I cannot forget that. I still think if we could, I realize you guys come funding from here, there, and wherever, CBDG and whatever, but if we could do streets at a time rather than sprinkling, we might be able to get these costs down. Those are my 2 comments.
Okay. Charlie?
Well, I was just looking back. I think we looked at this several months ago, and to address the question about which year of funds, it was 2017, 2018 PED improvement funds that were used for the design work. So I think it's not, no one's trying to pull a fast one. I think we just, literally, it takes time to get these projects moved forward. So there were already 2017, 2018 dollars used for part of this project, and we're now just trying to finish it. I appreciate staff kind of not letting the ball drop. It feels like some of these things do get lost at times. 29th Street shared use path, for example. But in this case, you know, I can see it was only less than a year ago that we were talking about this, and now we're being asked to make a recommendation about how to fund the project. So that feels like it's the next step, pretty naturally. And I know we haven't fully discussed the $600,000, how to recommend that, how it gets used, but to suggest a third of it goes to support ADA improvements seems appropriate in my mind, given that it was budgeted for PED bike ADA improvements.
Anyone else?
Well, I feel like these projects have all risen to the top of it as important, and if some get thrown back into the bucket, are they going to rise to the top again, and would we have eventually spent that money on these projects at maybe even a higher price next time they're bid? I understand the trying to figure out a cheaper way, but you know, I'm also in the business of getting bids and having to do things within a certain time frame, and I'm not sure that we have the luxury right now of developing that program. I think it's a great idea, but I feel like we need to do this now.
Anyone else? Well, I think Gary's got some creative ideas that have some potential. I think the construction industry now is probably, it's been on an uphill as far as costs for, gee, I know the last year. I've learned a lot about residential construction in the last year, but when you read about, you know, the industry in this country, prices are going up. And I think the bidding strategy is certainly very subjective. I think that the idea of using maybe what you might call unskilled labor creates some quality control issues. It's nice to, you know, I think that's taking a high road to try to get something done at a lower cost, but it certainly comes with, you know, some challenges too. Not that it wouldn't work, but I think it would take a lot of work to get, I don't know where you'd start organizing that, you know.
I guess one other thing to point out is the CDBG money is federal dollars, and so how we allocate those has to be through an approved letting process.
Right,
Those dollars,
right.
yeah.
Right.
We
Has to
also
follow
have to
federal
follow like
guidelines.
Davis-Bacon laws too for employment and labor and wages and stuff. So there's a lot of very strict federal requirements you have to follow when you spend federal money.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know in the context of the sidewalk discussions the last couple of years, we've talked about open-ended contracts where you get unit costs, you know, that, you know, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I don't know how applicable it is to these kinds of things, but it seems like it would be. And I don't know, you guys might share a little bit of your thoughts on that, you know, just for education as much as anything.
Well, one of my thoughts would be in the future, we may have some bid alternate projects and list out, separate the projects out and have alternates. And what we try to usually do is be pretty close to the budget we have, but we don't want to be under because we want to spend all of the funds, particularly if they're grant funds. So we try to, in the future, we may have a little more, and kind of an additional project just to see how the bids come in. We haven't bid any projects by square foot because we kind of have a defined on these, especially as it pertains to this project, since they're sidewalk gap projects. They have defined lengths of gaps. So I don't know, it wouldn't make sense to me to have a per square foot bid and then pick the projects, because we need to, the contractor is also bidding on the length of the projects, the location, how far they're spaced apart, so some of that goes into the bidding. And so on this project, we had 4 bids, and so even though it is higher, we had a good number of bidders. Sometimes we only get 1 or 2, but getting 4, we were pretty confident in. If we rebid the project, we're not going to get lower prices. And again, our prioritization list isn't going to change in a couple of months. When we look at 2019, these projects will still, if we don't fund them now, they'll still be there. But we do need to take this information going forward and look at our budget and our cost estimates. And like John said, these ramp projects, they were a lot more per ramp than we estimated, and you kind of mentioned some of the reasons, but we'll going forward need to start using this as an example for our estimates.
Well, I guess you could build the argument that if we took option 2 and spent less money this year, we'd probably bid those items again. They wouldn't get done as quickly, and they're kind of coming out of the same budget, which is the 2019 budget.
They're not going to get cheaper, and it's going to cost some more money to put the plans back together, to take these out of, to put these in the next set of plans. The work's done, but it's just the quantities and administrating, getting the plans to bid. So, yeah.
Well, in a way, looking ahead and, using the 2019 budget is kind of like a contingency in a way. I mean, you're not getting a free lunch out of the deal, but you're having to spend the money to get the work done you want to get done, so. Okay. I would entertain a motion to either approve or not approve the recommendation from staff to increase the budget by $200,000 utilizing funds from the 2019 budget.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carol? Okay. Motion passes. What would that be? 6-1, 7-1? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 6, the 2019 Transportation Commission retreat. And the action would be to receive the retreat agenda from the subcommittee. Do you want to do this, Dave, or?
Yeah, I can give everyone an intro. I sent out, I think last Friday, to you all the draft retreat agenda that the subcommittees helped staff put together. So Commissioner Schartz, Evans, and Payton and staff have met 3 times over the last couple of months to put together this agenda. We're having a social get-together this Friday as a kickoff to the retreat, and then next Friday, the 15th, will be the full-day retreat. Scott McCullen, our planning office, has agreed to help facilitate the retreat agenda on the 15th. So I also sent everyone a list of questions, survey questions that we're looking to get responses back to help get the discussion going at the retreat on some different topics. So please get those back to me by the end of the week. And yeah, that's all that I had. Steve, do you have any other comments on?
Well,
planning?
I think, you know, please take the time. It's really important to take the time to look at the questions that we prepared. We spent quite a bit of time discussing kind of, you know, the idea, the big idea for the retreat. And we began by looking at the roster for this commission and looking at who or what you represent, i.e. Health Department, KU, school district, pedestrians, bikes, whatever. And we're asking everybody to be thoughtful about that. What does that really mean in the context of what you bring to the table in these discussions? And that's all I'll say now. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it, you know, in a couple of weeks. But please give those questions their due diligence. I think we can really move this, we can really have a good session that Friday in that context. And Dave has made the point, well, is that, you know, are you specifically a representative of something, or are you a generalist, or both? And I think many of us have been on the commission for a couple of years now, so we're getting maybe a little bit better at this stuff, hopefully. But I really want to emphasize, give this agenda and give the questions their due diligence, and get them back to Dave by this Friday so we can put all this together and get everybody prepared, including Scott.
I have a question on the survey. The first one, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your knowledge of? Is 10 like super knowledgeable?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, staff items.
We included the flyer for the Bike Boulevard meetings here in the agenda. The public meetings are coming up here next week for the Bike Boulevard on 13th Street and 21st Street. So at each of these meetings, they'll be discussing both of those projects, getting comments from the public, so you're welcome to attend that. The consultant for the city will be getting input from the public on different types of traffic calming elements that go into Bike Boulevard, so before they start coming up with some different design options for those corridors. So just wanted to mention that.
Have you had much response from the survey, the community surveys?
They, I believe, I heard they had 200 responses. They've been getting responses through our Lawrence Listens webpage, so they've had a number of responses already. So you're welcome to attend that. And it's not on our agenda, but we did send out a press release here over the weekend that the city received TA grant from KDOT for the Lawrence Loop segments that include the gap on 29th Street and then the segment from 11th Street to 8th Street. That funding is for 2020. The federal funds for that project, and so we'll have to have a discussion on getting going with the design and budgeting for our city match of that project. We do have $100,000 in the 19 budget for design already that we were planning to use for starting to get plans, whether or not we got the grant or not, but we got the grant, and the grant's for construction, so that is really good news. So we'll be working on that and bringing more info back to the Transportation Commission on that as we get the ball rolling on that project. That is all that we have for staff items.
Is the consultant going to be facilitating the public meetings for the boulevards?
Yes, they'll be at the meetings.
Pardon me?
Yes, the consultant will be at the public
Okay,
meetings.
maybe you said that and I missed it, I'm sorry, but, okay.
I got a quick question about the KDOT award.
Mhm.
Can you just remind me, we submitted 3 proposals, right?
Yes,
How did we rank them in some order?
we did. They asked us to rank our own projects, and so we had 3. One was a shared use path along 6th Street from
Wisconsin,
Castle to Wisconsin.
Something like that.
Yeah. Or Monterey Way to Castle.
Right.
Yeah, Monterey Way to
Safe
Wisconsin.
routes.
Safe routes to school, I believe, was the second one, and the third one was the Lawrence Loop.
And that was the order we put them in?
That is the order we put them in.
Did you receive any feedback on the 2 that weren't funded?
Not on why they weren't selected.
Okay.
So I don't have any feedback on why they chose our 3rd ranked projects. Other than they look at all the projects, and they do have a scoring system, or they have given us some of the key elements that they score all the applications on. I don't anticipate they're going to share the scores with us. They didn't share them with us last year, so I don't have any other details on why they selected one over the other.
Well, I just like to add, I think that, twice before, the city has applied for funds to support the Lawrence Loop completion and had been denied, and then made some major investments to help, I think, make a better case for the, especially this segment going near downtown. And so, congratulations. I think that was well worth the time and effort put into that, at least in terms of we got the award finally, or at least a part of it. So that's great news.
It is.
And for all the people out there that care about completing the Lawrence Loop, this is pretty welcome news for them, so.
Well, if I recall, the entire loop, if it were to be complete now, would be $2 to $3 million. Is that correct?
Oh, I think
Based
it's
on
going
old
to
estimates.
be more than that.
Is it like 10 million or something?
No, I would say
I
that
don't have
estimate
the
from a few
numbers.
years ago was perhaps way out of line with current dollars, but
Well, I'm
Yeah,
trying
back
to
then
put
it
the
was,
I think
480
we,
in the context of what the whole thing is, and it's pretty substantial, really, I mean.
yeah, that estimate may have just included construction costs and not design
Okay.
and right-of-way. Some of the segments in the northwest part of the loop aren't
Oh,
even in the
true.
city limits yet and would require
I see,
right-of-way.
sure, sure. Okay. Commission items, anybody have anything? And just,
I just had a couple things, but I'm not sure we can talk about the calendar, because mine are really related to the calendar.
well, I was going to get to the calendar too, Charlie.
Okay.
Do you have general things, or?
No, I mean, they're basically about the calendar. so.
Okay, okay. Well, I guess this is kind of calendar related too, but our event this Friday is at our home on Ash in North Lawrence. And the first thing we need to have a head count. And we've asked for that and haven't been very successful at hearing back. I know Carol responded, and Catherine and Aaron.
I
but
plan to be there, sorry.
How many? How
Just
many?
me.
Just you?
I think it's just me.
Just you?
I won't be able to attend, I apologize.
Okay.
I'll be out of town.
You'll be out of town? Okay, from Chuck? Okay.
I'll be there.
Dave? Okay, 1, 2,
But I can eat a lot of tacos.
okay. And you're very welcome to bring spouses and friends, so, you know, if that's, if you want to change your mind and let me know.
I had to
that's
drag her
fine.
last year, so I don't know. if She wants to
Pardon me?
We had a date night. You might remember last year? It was like, we went there,
Yeah.
then we had a date night. That's how I,
Yeah, yeah.
That's how
you
you
know,
met her there.
yeah.
That was the trick you used.
This isn't gonna happen again.
You're not gonna pull that off again this year, right?
Not 2 years in a row. No.
Well, I guess we'll have to go to Plan B here, because we were thinking about Taco Zone catering this, and they have a minimum of 15 people. So I don't
Donna can eat a
count.
lot, she said.
You sure you don't want to bring your spouses now, or?
I'm not sure I can commit him.
Okay. Well, we'll figure, what would Plan B?
I might be able to bring 2 little girls.
Well,
Give my wife a nice night off.
oh, yeah.
She might appreciate that.
How many people are coming? I don't think the whole family's gonna wanna go.
It's open to the public.
It
Yeah,
is
there you
open
go.
to
You
the
can invite
public.
your neighbors.
Yeah.
There's some other folks in North Lawrence who might want to come.
Well,
Gary, you're welcome.
How many we have?
Kidding.
Still get her hopes
well, you're
up.
more than welcome, Gary.
How many did you say we have?
Okay, Dave?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You have 2 people? 8. So,
And I might have an extra. I will say I just happened to be at my husband's work today for Taco Monday.
uh-oh.
And everybody just brought a taco fixing.
Oh, really? Okay.
It worked out
Okay.
pretty well.
Well, I think maybe that would be safer now to do something like that. And we can provide some drinks and stuff. So we'll make that on us. But why don't we do that? We'll put together a little list of stuff and send it out to everybody. But as far as getting to the house, it's on 718 Ash in North Lawrence, and it's just north of the levee. And we have a pretty long drive and some parking areas on the side. I'm going to reserve the garage, in front of the garage, for Carol. So, you know, park wherever you can, and you can park on Ash Street too. And we'll be ready for you around 5:30, and we'll coordinate some, I think that's, we can get some taco shells and stuff like that.
I could tell you right now, I can bring beef.
Okay.
And,
Okay,
other
okay,
stuff, so.
okay.
I can do cheese. I can do whatever.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll send out a little note to everybody, and you can tell us what you're bringing. And if it looks like we have too much of something, then we'll let you know. How's that? Okay. Any other calendar items, Dave?
So I wanted to just ask about the crossing on 11th Street, New Hampshire. Could you give us some sense of preview on that? I'm just curious about that intersection.
We had a request to look at that last year. So it's kind of been on our list to review. There's been some interest in development close by there at 11th and Mass. That may change the way that intersection functions.
Okay.
But aside from that, it would be looking at what type of improvements could be done, safety improvements to make that crossing safer for pedestrians across 11th Street, since it's just a three-legged intersection with a stop on New Hampshire. So
I just raise it up because I think that's one of those streets that's always seemed to me to be a little bit tricky for people when it hits those kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but the Vermont is another one of those where it kind of jogs around. And so I think it's confusing for everyone when it's not a standard intersection. And I didn't know, like, if it's literally just that New Hampshire and 11th, but a couple blocks, over is where Vermont is. And it just seems like that's always, I don't know if there's any data around crash history there or not, but it always seems awkward when people are trying to navigate through that intersection as to what they're supposed to do. So maybe that's bigger than your scope. I just kind of wanted to bring up two other items on the calendar. I see on the survey we probably have a space for this, so I'll just mention it and leave it at that. But this is the year for the sidewalk hazard policy to be, there's a budget item for it, and the policy is supposed to happen. And I think it's important for us to pay attention to how that rolls out. In particular, the cities had discussed having different sections of town that would be inspected, and that's not been beyond the city commission. There hasn't been any public discussion about that, and I think this is a good forum for that public discussion, if there is any, or if that's useful for the continued dialogue about the sidewalk maintenance in our community. So I think sometimes when we think about our role, we might forget that part of our role is to create that space for public dialogue so that it happens here in a more official way, that city staff can understand what public reactions are to city policies and programs. And when you're hearing things in different spaces like neighborhood meeting or whatever, that's to me a indication that perhaps we need to find a way to put that on our agenda, maybe not for any major decision that night, but at least to create a space for public dialogue. And I think that sidewalk hazard policy had a lot of community interest. So this is the year probably that needs to be kind of back somehow in our space. And then I just thought, it occurs to me that, I thought we talked last year about getting ahead of the allocation discussion about how to spend that money or how to allocate or recommend allocation of that funding, and we didn't. And so, we made a decision kind of in an ad hoc way tonight. I think it was probably the right decision, but it also feels a little bit like, what happened? Why didn't we notice that last year, that we were not getting ahead of that? And so I hope that in the future we're able to create the dialogue with the public about what's the way we spend that money now that we are expecting, a pretty significant amount of money allocated to these projects. So That's all.
Well, I'll just comment on the discussion regarding sidewalks. I think it can be confusing. I think we need to find a way to be very clear why they would come here and what they would expect if they did.
I'm thinking in terms of our calendar, like, when is there going to be some update from city staff about what section of town will be inspected? What's the data that's going to be collected? How's that going to be shared? Are we going to provide any space for that? Or is it just going to be, you know, staff doing their work and the rest of the community just feeling like there's no place to express their concern about the way it's being carried out? I don't know. I mean, I honestly have no idea whether the public will react to that or not, but I think it's possible, given the reaction, just the anticipation of that approach. You know, a proactive approach to enforcement might trigger a lot of people getting upset and wanting to figure out, well, why is this happening? And sometimes people don't read the news until it's happening to them. And so maybe there's some space or place on our agenda in the year where we're going to get an update, and that'll give us, kind of create the stage for if the public wants to say anything about it. I mean, it might need to be timed with after the inspections are completed and notices have been given out. So if people want to speak, they can come and speak here. I think that might help with managing the reaction, if there is a reaction, before it goes to the city commission. And then the allocation thing, I'd hope would be on our calendar really soon. It just feels like we're behind the time on that. So.
Right. Well, I can't off the top of my head tell you what we have on our agenda, but we do have for the retreat agenda a discussion about public input and also our purpose. And I think this falls in that context myself. You know, I think it would be great if we could become, you know, help the city with things like this. But I'm not sure strategically, you know, how that's going to work in moving that whole thing along. I don't know.
We can definitely bring you an update on the sidewalk hazard program. We are pursuing getting that started this year. I don't know, other than to keep the commissioners informed, because obviously you guys will probably get questioned about it, that there's any decisions or anything to be made. We're basically following the city ordinance and state statute. It is property owners' responsibility, and we are moving forward. And we're going to give them the option, fix it, or we'll fix it and assess it. So the program's pretty much developed. We can fill you in on all the details and how it's going to work, so you are better informed to be able to answer questions when you get caught on the street, basically. But yeah, and Steve's right. I think that will be a good discussion about you know, your positions, what's expected, what your expectations are of staff, and trying to feel that out a little bit better as well. But we'll bring you back an update on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it. Okay, it looks like we're ready to adjourn. If anybody's interested in a motion, we'll accept that.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Was that Donna and Catherine?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.